For those of you who don't know, my name is Tad Smith, and I've had the distinct pleasure of serving on the library board for the last 7 years, including this last year as president. First, I just want to take the opportunity to welcome all of our patrons and friends to our annual meeting. I appreciate you taking the time on a Saturday afternoon to join us, and more importantly, for your continued financial support of our library. Without your support, the library would not be where it is today. It really is the foundation and heart of our community here in Darien. I also want to take the opportunity to thank our director, Alan Gray, and our wonderful staff. We're fortunate to have the best librarians in the country. They're innovative, resourceful, and dedicated to providing first-class user experience, or as Danny Meyer would say, enlightened hospitality. Lastly, I want to thank my fellow board members for all their many contributions behind the scenes. While many of you may be familiar with the unique public-private partnership our library has enjoyed since at least 1963, I thought it might be instructive to put some numbers around it. Our total annual budget is approximately $4.8 million. Roughly 73% or $3.5 million of this funding comes from the town of Darien. Each year we undergo a lengthy budget approval process with the Board of Finance to secure this funding. This year we requested and received a 2.2% increase over last year, mostly to go towards salary increases for our well-deserved staff. Again, most of this funding is used to pay for salary and benefits. The balance is used to run the building: electricity, heat, cooling, insurance, maintenance, etc. The other 27% of that $4.8 million, or about $1.3 million, comes from our Friends budget. $725,000 comes for annual gifts that we raise each year, and approximately $500,000 comes from about a 5% draw on our endowment. What is important to note is that this is private funding pays for all of the content in the library. To give you an idea, this year we purchased 15,000 books, 3,000 magazines, 2,000 DVDs, and multiple database subscriptions. We also offered over 1,300 programs, including author events like tonight, music performances, art exhibits, and a variety of classes to promote learning by our children, teens, and adults. Just to give you a few ideas or examples of our children's and teens programs, we offered an early literacy texting initiative to bring pre-literacy practices to parents' fingertips. We offered over 347 story times to Darien families' children's this year. We had a STEAM camp, which is a full week, all-day learning experience for students in the 4th through 6th grade, which teaches the disciplines of science, technology, engineering, and math. We had art classes, which included sewing, pillow making, gelatin print making, and the weekly open tea. We had writing workshops with authors such as Kelly Barnhill, The Witch's Boy, for children's aged to 10 to 14. We had an annual teen talent show, which included 10 acts from participants in the middle school and upper school, with over 75 people in attendance. Importantly, and I've been here around midterms and finals, we offered a professional yoga instructor, a meditation coach, and Olipi, the therapy dog, to help relieve stress of our teenagers. We also offered 28 coding classes in various languages, normally or often taught by our own Darien teenagers. I certainly couldn't teach one of those myself if I had to. A few stats just to demonstrate how impactful these programs were. Our children's circulations of books and downloadable content totaled over 272,000 items. Our children's program attendance totaled over 29,000 people here for the various programs. To give you a few ideas of our adult programs, we had an adult day camp, which was new this year, to serve young adults in their 20s and 30s, including those that are single or without kids, with programs and social activities, including book clubs, often held at local bars, museum field trips, and social events at the library. It now counts over 1,000 members. We also had a wine tasting with Nick Trolio of Nicholas Roberts Wines, who led a 2-part class on how to judge and evaluate fine wine. We had a session on how to make the perfect meatball. We had a tree identification walk with the Darien Nature Center at Selleck Woods. We had our Friday weekly film screenings, which continue to be a very popular venue for our community as a way to socialize and to watch good films. We had over 11,000 patrons attend a film screening this year. Our adult circulation, both of books and downloadable content, totaled over 346,000 items, and our program attendance by adults was over 31,000. So it's a well-used library. I want to also really point out our staff, which I know Alan's going to spend a little more time on, but in our knowledge and learning services, staff fielded over 31,000 questions this year in person, by telephone, email, or IM. We also launched this spring a redesigned research page on our website, which provides quick access to our databases and highlights digital resources to answer all inquiries. Our Reader Services Department served more than 52,000 patrons on a one-on-one basis, including 30,000 circulation assists, 6,400 direct requests, 3,100 reference questions, and nearly 3,000 personal book recommendations from our well-read staff. On the technology front, we launched our first website redesign and first major upgrade to our catalog system in over 8 years. Our catalog now provides a simple search screen that gets you the material you are looking for faster and with a lot less hassle than it did before. We also made a number of upgrades to our physical plant, including a new air handling system out on Main Street here as you come in the front door to keep the winter chill out of Main Street when people are coming in and out of the library, new shelving, new cork floor in the children's library, and improvements outside, including a new irrigation system and decorative stones in our parking lot. Our endowment received several bequests this year and now stands at approximately $10 million. And as I stated, we draw about 5% of a rolling 3-year average on that endowment to help support our annual Friends budget every year. So in conclusion, I just want to thank everybody again for their support. Please continue to use the library, enjoy it, and support it as a valuable resource for our community. So next on the agenda, I want to take a minute to recognize we have actually 4 retiring board members this year. First, and I don't see Sue, is Sue Weaver. Sue served on the board for 6 years. She was on our fundraising, law, and policy and nominating committees, and we very much valued her service. Is she here? No. So we'll give her a gift when we see her next. Next is Sarah Ferenzi. She served on our board for 4 years, and this year as our secretary on the executive committee. She also served on the nominating and fundraising committees. And is Sarah here? Guess they don't want their gifts. Okay. Randy, I know, is here. So Randy and I served together for the board for the last 6 years. Randy's been our fearless treasurer, also an executive committee member. He also chaired our audit and finance and budget committees to make sure that we were operating everything on budget and profitably. So Randy, if you come up here, I'll give you a little token of appreciation. And last but certainly not least, there you are, Sue, is Sue McGraw. Sue has been on the board for 6 years. She's also, as many know, has been a champion of our children's library, and she also served on our program committee. And we appreciate everything. Okay, so the next item on the agenda
is me.
Uh-oh.
So actually, I'm Amy Kamen-Chalnoki. I'm vice president of the board, and actually the last, but definitely not the least, is Tad Smith. Tad's been on the board for 7 years, 2 full 3-year terms, and then a 7th year as president. He was vice president before that and head of the investment committee and did a great job on that. When he was vice president, he and I worked together. I was president and Tad was vice president. We worked together through the transition when Louise left after her 3 decades plus of service, and we made the transition and welcomed Alan in. And so Tad was a fantastic partner in that. We've really appreciated his wisdom, his thoughtfulness. He's been supportive of the library in all the important ways, and a really, really powerful advocate for us with the town and within the community. So please join me in thanking Tad for his service and his leadership. You get 2 things.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, Christmas in October. So next on the agenda, we would like to call up Jan Smith, who chaired our nominating committee this year, to announce our new trustees.
Thank you, Ted. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased today to provide the report of the nominating committee for 2016. Joining me on the committee this year were former trustees and Friends of the Library Margot Congdon and Karen Elders, as well as current trustees Dave Ott and Randy Heck. So I would like to thank them all for their excellent service as we met a number of times over the course of the spring and summer. On behalf of the committee now, I'm pleased to announce the following nominees for a 3-year term from 2016 through 2019. Erica Allen, Mike Cipoletti, Allegra Erickson, Malin Gasserud, and Jim Steinthal. For re-election to their second 3-year term, expiring in 2019, are Ed Barksdale, Kevin Gasvoda, and myself. And lastly, for re-election to a 1-year term expiring in 2017, current trustee Amy Cholnacki. At this time then, I would ask for a second from the floor, please.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any nominations from the floor? Thank you. At this point then, I would like to call for a vote from all of the Friends of the Library for the slate as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Congratulations to all our new trustees, and this then concludes the report of the nominating committee.
So next on our agenda, I'd like to introduce and call forward Ann Mendel, who's an honorary trustee of the library. Ann?
Is that better? The new honorary trustee of the library. But first, I just thought I'd give you a word or two about how this all got started and former trustees. Way back in 1977 and 78, Harold W. McGraw Jr. and Ann Morrow Lindbergh were our first honorary trustees. Harold had served 2 terms on the board, beginning in 1951 and ending in 1974, and he served twice as president and as chairman of several campaigns, and in one case he actually sort of single-handedly got the library built. But he's really mostly known for the children's wing, which is named in his honor. And he was really committed to the important role of the public library from the beginning of a person's life until the end of each person's life. I regard Harold McGraw as the father of this library. Ann Morrow Lindbergh, and some of you may not know this, a famous writer in her own life and in her own right, really, and the wife of Charles Lindbergh, the aviator, lived here in Darien for many years and raised her children here, one of whom went to Darien High School with me. And when she was very helpful to the library, and we asked her to help us when we were putting together a little brochure for the library. And she wrote a sentence that's introducing it, saying, "The quality of a library is a measure of the town's culture." She was a beautiful woman in every way. My husband Steve and I came next, somewhere in the last century, as honorary trustees, which was a total surprise to be in such august company. We both served as presidents and in lots of roles, and then as co-chairman of yet another campaign. I think that maybe after Harold McGraw, Steve may have been Louise Berry's favorite trustee. He was very good at fundraising. He made everyone laugh, and he did everything Louise wanted him to do. So, and then coming up to this century, the two honorary trustees who are with us tonight, Kim Hufford and George Wiper. Where are you? There's George they're in back. They're humble. And they also served the library both as presidents and as chairman of the campaign that brought us this library. I regard this library as the library that Kim and George built. So you can see that there's a long tradition, a history of caring and hardworking trustees, and I would like to thank you all. Now I get to my pleasant job, and that is to present the new honorary trustee, which is Suzanne McGraw. As you know from Tad's comments, Sue has been an active trustee for the past 6 years. During that time, she's been very, very supportive for the Children's Library and supports the annual birthday party each January, and worked hard in enlisting support for the wonderful, wonderful services the library provides for all children and their families in this town. Beyond that, the McGraw, Sue's president of the McGraw Family Foundation, and with Sue and with her two brothers, they've initiated an extraordinary and groundbreaking program in the Children's Library called the Children's Library Fellowship. And that brings the best and the brightest and the most promising of recent library school graduates to this library for 2-year terms. And it's in its 5th year and is set to continue for years to come. For all that Sue has done and for the library and its mission, I'm honored to welcome Suzanne McGraw as an honorary trustee of the library.
Thank you very much. It's very humbling, and I do appreciate what my dad and mother also started for this community in their love of books and libraries and all that they give to the community and to each family. So I'm very honored to be part of it and enjoying all of it, and the people who serve it, the people who enjoy it, is very, very special. So thank you all. And we'll keep meeting, and birthday parties are always on schedule.
So next on our agenda is the director's report by Alan, and I also just want to reiterate Amy's comments that he's been a fabulous, fabulous director here at the library, and we hope he'll continue to be our director for many years to come.
Thank you, Tad. I've got a pretty simple job as the director. The library's bylaws say that I shall, quote, provide the best possible library service and shall, quote, organize all staff to the greatest possible efficiency. That's pretty simple because the library board provides the direction and resources for me to do that. Library trustees are a remarkable group of community leaders who year after year provided the guidance, the resources, and the encouragement that has made this library the community leader that it is. To all of the trustees here, to those of you who are going off the board, to those of you who served before, those who are continuing, and to those who are coming onto the board, thank you very much from me, from our staff, on behalf of the library and this community. You have made a significant difference in what this town of Darien is, and what you have done is, as Tad said, made this the heart and center of the community. I've just got one quibble with the bylaws. I am directed, quote, to secure adequate professional personnel. There's no way that any one of the staff members who are here could be described as just adequate. Tad talked about the numbers that we can measure and what this library does, and what we do is off the charts. I'm not a librarian. I've got an MBA in corporate finance, and I can quote numbers with the best of them. But let me just talk about the people who are here, because it's the people of this library, the culture that they represent, and what they do that make the significant difference, even in this fantastic building which the Friends of the library built with their private donations. When you come to the library, you see the staff in action. You get to see what they do, you should know that when other libraries come to it, we have been visited by more than 2,000 librarians from 325 libraries since we opened this building. Many of them come to look at the building, and the first thing they glom onto is that this building is great, but the staff is off the charts extraordinary and makes the absolute difference. There's something different about their welcoming spirit, their hospitality, their professionalism, and their can-do spirit. You all see them when you come in. What you don't know probably is what a national reputation this staff has. And without using any names, let me give you some examples of that. Staff members have spoken at conferences and other events all across the country. On customer service at the Connecticut Library Association. By the way, at that same conference, the library won 3 awards for the quality of its publicity, completely sweeping the boards. At the Public Library Association meeting on such subjects as merchandising and youth services and marketing of programs. At the American Library Association on libraries and user experience, and at a vendor briefing there for what the newest technologies were. They have spoken at conferences and webinars in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Kansas, Alabama, Wisconsin, and Idaho. Staff members serve on 9 different boards, committees, and councils of the American Library Association, including one staff member who is on the committee that chooses the Newbery Award for the Best Children's Library Book. Our staff members just this last year were published in Library Journal, Public Libraries Magazine, Schools and Library Journal Quarterly, the ALSC, that's the American Association for Library Services to Children. You thought the military was bad on acronyms. RUSC, R-U-S-K, Reference and User Quarterly, Library Reads, and Library Journal Reviews. Darien Library's leadership and innovation was included in an article on our Minecraft services that was published in the New York Times Sunday magazine a couple of months ago. And Library Journal wrote an article about the new website and catalog that we did that Tad spoke about. I do want to take a moment here to highlight the materials handling department. They are an internal services department. They don't get a chance to go speak at conferences, but they ought to, because what they do is make this library the single most cost-effective and efficient library in the state. It costs us 20% less to circulate a book than our most effective peer library competitor. And it's possibly, this library, because of their work primarily, is possibly the most efficient library in the country. Our RFID sorting system that you all return your books to was the first one installed in New England. Since it was installed, New York Public Library, Brooklyn Public Library, Cambridge Public Library, Worcester Public Library, and any number of other libraries have come to see what we have done as deciding what they wanted to do. We use an Italian binding technique to do some of our books and our magazines. And when we talked to the vendor and he said, well, you know, it's kind of you and Harvard Library that are doing it, you and Harvard University. Our ArtSource book servicing ordering system is known as the Darien system. And the vendor comes to us when it wants to develop new services that they're going to provide, for example, to New York Public Library and to others, because we are regarded as so innovative in what we're doing. The library departments annually host several conferences to attract libraries from other states in the region, including one on children's librarianship, the Kid Lib Camp, which is in its either 7th or 8th year. The other on Reader's Advisory, which is in its 2nd year. Staff members are founders of roundtables for programming and Reader's Advisory among this state library. Staff members serve on the Technology Advisory Committee for San Jose State University of Information, the Penguin Random House Advisory Board, the Steering Committee of Library Reads, and is an advisor to the H.W. Wilson's Core Collection. One member of this staff is a founder of the Black Caucus of the Connecticut Library Association and a leader and mentor of the Women's Mentoring Network in Stamford. One of us is the chief of the Darien Fire Department. A new librarian on staff was just chosen as one of the American Library Association's emerging leaders, and she is going on just as another staff member goes off. A staff member was chosen to attend the American Library Association Leadership Institute. Library Journal each year chooses a number of emerging leaders called Movers and Shakers. It's the most prestigious award that someone who works in a library can get. We have 2 of those people on our staff. Adequate indeed. How this plays out, you see it every day in the numbers and your engagement, but what I get to see are the hidden moments. The times where we find someone's wedding ring that got returned with a book and get it back to them. When we find in a book a picture that is amazingly valuable to someone, obviously, we have no way of tracing it, but we trace it and figure out whose it is and return it to them. Even in Darien, you might be surprised at the value of some of the dollar bills used as bookmarkers in books that get returned. Right. I heard about a local businessman who approached a staff member and said, "I just want to thank you for what you did 18 years ago when I was starting my small business. I don't know how you did what you did, but I think about that every day because it's so memorable and helpful to me." We were able, in our technology space, to take a piece of technology that a widower had and convert it to something that would allow him to see the wife that he had not seen for 18 years. That's what it means to be a member of this library. The people here are the single best staff of any library in the country. And would you please stand? I want you up. I want you up. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alan. So for our feature event tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce Martha Hall Kelly. Martha is a New England native, now splitting her time between New York City, Vineyard, and Atlanta. But she and I were talking earlier, she did spend a number of years living out here along Neck Point in Darien, and she's quite happy to be back in town. She worked as an advertising copywriter for many years and raised 3 children while researching Lilac Girls, her first novel. We're very fortunate to have her here with us today to discuss her book. Please join me in welcoming Martha Hall Kelly.
Oh my goodness. Everybody can hear me, right? This is state of the art. Thank you for having me on such a special night. I'm so grateful and a little awestruck, to be honest. I never in a million years thought I'd be standing here tonight. I, as Ted told you, used to live right over here on Long Neck Point Road, right next to Pear Tree Point School. And we moved to Atlanta in 2010. And one of the many things I missed about Darien was this lovely place that was newly built actually at the time. And Georgia, we found out, doesn't really have libraries anywhere close to like this. The focus is more on the church in the community, and a lot of people get their books from the church, which is a whole nother discussion. But I have a much greater appreciation for this library now that I live in Atlanta. So I'm sure you all appreciate it very much. In this past April, I developed an even greater, I have to do some logistics here. I developed an even greater appreciation for the Darien Library when I saw a very special video online. My novel Lilac Girls was about to launch, and being an unknown debut author, I was terrified no one would know about it. But then 5 minutes with Jen came into my life. Of course, you all know about Jen Dayton and Marianne Paternitty's wonderful videos in which they talk about their favorite books. I thought I'd won the lottery when I saw one that they talked about my book. And it quickly made the rounds of my family. My 2 daughters are here now, and you're smiling, you know. And they were saying things like, Mom, your book is the only one that Marianne says anything about. They love Marianne. I wore out the replay button, watching Jen with her charm bracelet jangling say, Marianne and Pat have already laid it in as a book in a bag. Be the first to read it. I was so grateful. So thank you, Jen and Marianne, not only because you are my new go-to book suggestion source, loved American Housewife, but because you noticed Lilac Girls early and started the viral buzz about it, which really helped this important story get told. So I'll always be incredibly grateful. So tonight I'm going to tell you a little bit about the true story behind Lilac Girls and how the book came to be. I'll read a short passage from the book and then open it up for questions. And feel free to ask me anything, no matter how strange it may seem. And then we'll do a book signing. And then wine and cheese. Yeah, this is the best library ever. So I've been talking to a lot of groups around the country about Lilac Girls, as you can imagine, and I have my remarks down pat, but I wrote special remarks for tonight, so I'm reading a little bit more from my notes tonight, so please forgive me. But before I start, I always like to ask who has already read Lilac Girls, so I can see if I need to be, oh, good, wow. So that's about half and half. I like to ask if everyone's read it, then we can talk freely and I don't have to worry about spoilers, but I'll be careful for the people that haven't read it to make sure we don't try not to divulge too much about the book. So Lilac Girls. When I lived here in Darien, I led a double life. Most of the time, I was a stay-at-home mother of 3, shuttling kids to activities and exercising the dog. But I had a hidden life, kept secret from everyone outside of our house. Because every free moment I got, I drove 2 hours north to Bethlehem, Connecticut, to sit in an old root cellar under a beautiful 18th century farmhouse. It was the Bellamy Faraday House and Gardens, and I was there to research Caroline Faraday's life. It all started one gray Mother's Day back in 2000. When my mother died and I was feeling blue, and my husband Michael said, I'll take care of the kids, you go up to that house and garden that you always wanted to go to. And I had carried a page from Victoria Magazine in my wallet for months. And the title of it was Caroline's Incredible Lilacs. And it showed a photograph of Caroline Faraday, a former Broadway actress and New York City socialite, and her lovely white clapboard country home. So I took him up on it, and I drove up to Bethlehem in Litchfield County, and the garden did not disappoint. It was incredible. It was the perfect time to visit, late May, and the lilacs were all out, and the fragrance was thick in the air. And Caroline and her mother, Eliza, had collected so many varieties of lilacs from around the world, from deep aubergine, almost black, to baby pinks and white varieties. So that was incredible. And then I took the house tour, and they have local volunteer docents who lead tours since Caroline died in 1990 and left her home to the care of Connecticut Landmarks, who've done a great job with it. And it was fascinating learning about this New York Society family. Eliza and Henry Faraday and their daughter Caroline bought the house together. At that time in Connecticut, when adults purchased a home, the children were part of the transaction. They actually became a third owner of the house. So Caroline was an equal owner to both of her parents. And they bought it as a country retreat after Caroline had developed a lung condition which prevented them from using their summer home in Southampton. It was a cottage, but you can imagine in Southampton at that time the cottages were incredible. It's still there, actually. Sadly, Henry Faraday, Caroline's father, died very soon after they bought the house. He only had a few months in the house, and he was the one that really loved it. It turns out his lungs ended up being the problem, and he died from pneumonia. That was always one of Caroline's greatest wounds, as the people that have read the book know. And Eliza and young Caroline had to get through that terrible time, and the house was a huge part of what helped them do that. Also on the tour, I learned about Caroline's ancestors, the Wolseley women, legendary philanthropists and staunch abolitionists who helped nurse soldiers on the Gettysburg battlefield. Incredible women. So it was a great tour, and our last stop was on the landing outside of Caroline's bedroom on the second floor of the house. And her desk is there just as she left it, with her big old manual Remington typewriter and her photographs of Charles de Gaulle and Napoleon. But I was drawn to a small picture of about 50 middle-aged women lined up in 3 rows. And I asked the guide, "Who is that?" And she said, "Oh, those are the rabbits." 74 Polish Catholic women who were political prisoners at Ravensbrück concentration camp, Hitler's only all-female concentration camp. They were operated on by the Nazis to test the efficacy of sulfa drugs. Their legs were surgically opened, and broken glass, dirt, wood, bacteria were inserted into the incisions, and they were sewn back up. The Nazi doctors at Ravensbrück nicknamed them the rabbits because they hopped about the camp, the ones that survived, because their legs were so badly damaged. Once those survivors went back to Poland, once the liberation of the camp happened, they didn't do well behind the Iron Curtain, often without proper medical care. Caroline Faraday found out about the rabbits from her French friends, who were also political prisoners at Ravensbrück and had become friends with the Polish women while they were there. And Caroline rallied America behind these women and brought them to the US for rehabilitation. Once the docent shared all that, I couldn't stop thinking about it the whole way home from Bethlehem. At the time, I lived in Fairfield. How could such an important story just get lost? So I started going up to Bethlehem on weekends, any chance I got, to research Caroline's life up there in the archives she left in the former root cellar. Her antique rose books and photos, she kept everything, thank goodness. And I did that for a few years, becoming friendly with the people who worked there, never intending to do anything, never mind write a novel. Then we moved to Darien, and one night my husband Michael and I went to see God of Carnage in the city with another couple, a business colleague of his and his wife, Betty Sargent. At dinner after, out of the blue, I just started talking about the story about the rabbits in Poland, and she said, "Oh, I have a new Polish daughter-in-law, so I'm interested in Poland, and this sounds like it would make a great novel, and you should write it, and by the way, did I tell you I'm a book editor?" And I said, no, she hadn't, and she said, "All I need is a chapter." So at the time, I thought, oh, that's crazy. I've only written 30-second television commercials. I could not write a novel. But it stuck in my head somehow. It seemed crazy, the whole idea of a novel. But a few years later, my husband accepted a job in Atlanta at the Weather Channel, and we moved yet again. I had no friends, which sounds sad, but it actually was really good for a writer to have no friends. my son was at a new high school, and I dropped him off one morning and went through the Starbucks drive-thru as I did every morning and ordered my decaf cappuccino. But somehow that morning, the barista gave me a caffeinated one by mistake, and I went home and the novel just started coming out. It was so great. Thank you, caffeine. Thank you, Starbucks. So I sent Betty her chapter, and she liked it. So she said, keep going. And I did. And at first I sat. I was actually going to a personal trainer at the time, and he said, you should sit in your dog run, and it's just like being in a concentration camp, and it'll help you with your writing. And I said, oh, that's a great idea. So I went back there, and I sat back there, and trying to kind of make the connection. But then I realized that the neighbors, when they drove down their driveway, could see me. So I had to stop doing that because they would think I was really, a weird northern person sitting in the dog run. So, but I was also researching the former prisoners' accounts of their horrific time at Ravensbrück at the time, and it took me there all too well. I didn't need the dog run. So I wrote the story in first person point of view and added two characters. One, a Polish teenager named Kasia, one of the rabbits, because the women who were used for the experience were very young girls. They were from 14 to about 26 years old. They wanted sadly, they wanted the healthiest prisoners that they could get. And she had been arrested by the Nazis for couriering in the Lublin, Poland underground, as all of these girls were from Lublin. And Kasia is based on a real survivor named Nina Avanska. The second, Herta Oberhauser, I'm sorry, I need my water. I never drink water, but this time. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. Oh, that's better. The second, Herta Oberhauser, was the only female doctor at the all-female camp. Oh my God, I'm sorry, you have to see it, a cup holder. I have to take a picture of this podium because it's got, it's like a Lexus or something. It's fabulous. So anyway, thank you. The second, Herta Oberhauser, the only female doctor at the all-female camp, and she helped perform the experimental surgeries on the girls. So those were my two other first-person point of view characters. I knew the voice of Caroline Faraday. I had grown up in New England. My mother had that kind of old New England voice, but I didn't know anything about Poland or Germany. So I bribed my 17-year-old son to come to Poland and Germany with me. I told him he could have a beer, which, it worked. He came with me. I told him Polish women were really beautiful, which is true, and that, encouraged him to come as well. And we started in Lublin, where the women were from, and it was just incredible. Thank goodness I took that trip, because I don't think I really could have written the book without doing that. Lublin is a beautiful city, if you're ever in Poland, but it still has a lot of, the effects of the war are still very evident there, in Warsaw as well. So my son and I took the same train ride that the women were forced to take from Warsaw to Berlin, and then from Berlin up to Fürstenberg, which is where the Ravensbrück concentration camp is still today. It's a memorial. And it's about 50 miles north of Berlin in a beautiful little town. We stepped off the train on the same platform that the women had stepped off of almost 70 years before, and you could just feel the despair still that they must have felt. You could still see the church spire that they all talked about, because when they got off the train and were greeted by, the guards, mostly female guards with their dogs, they saw the church spire and they said to each other, we're going to be okay, because these are God-fearing people, and as long as we work hard, we'll be fine. And nothing could be further from the truth. So we went to the camp, and a lot of it is still there. The barracks are gone, but the crematoria, the shooting wall, everything in the book is actually there. I didn't fictionalize anything about the physicality of the camp. You can go up to Commandant Zurin's home, which is up on a ridge, and look down into the camp, and you just can see everything. And you wonder, he raised his 4 children there for 6 years, and his wife lived there. How could they do that and see what was happening to these women? It was just incredible. So I came home from that trip filled to the brim with seams, and I wrote like a woman possessed, because maybe I had been, possibly, by Caroline Faraday or someone. And I had made one friend, a documentary filmmaker, who didn't think I was strange to be on this quest, but she became fascinated with the story as well, and decided to make it the subject of her next film. So we went back to Ravensbrück for the 70th anniversary of the liberation of the camp, and spent some time with two of the survivors, two of the rabbits, Wanda and Stasha. And they're incredible women. And I told them I was telling their story, and they said, well, you better do it quickly because I'm 92. And I said, well, when the book's done, I'll FedEx it. And she said, well, you better. So meeting them made me want to get their story told even more. They were excited about that possibility, actually. So I eventually got an agent, and finally one Thursday she called and said, okay, we're sending the manuscript out. And after 10 years of research and writing, it was surreal to think that she was sending it out to the big four editors. And she said, her name's Alexandra Machinist, she's incredible, and she said, don't be worried if you don't hear from me for a couple of days. This was on a Thursday. So Friday came and went, and of course, there was no word, and I thought, no, everyone hates it. I completely disregarded her advice about, don't get worried. But then Monday came, and I was watching the Today Show in my pajamas, and she said, we have our first offer. And so that was exciting, and that whole week was unreal, and I was lucky enough to have the choice of several different editors, and I ended up picking an amazing one at Ballantine, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. So once the book went to print, it took a while, they sent one copy to us in Atlanta, and my husband and I sat there looking at it like it was a live bomb or a newborn baby or something. We were like, what do we do with this? What if people don't read it, or what if they do and they don't like it? So the book launched on this past April 5th, and it became terrifyingly quiet. A lot of writers talk about that, the kind of moments after a book comes out. A few reviews trickled in from Amazon. Of course, I had 5 minutes with Jen, which, was a comfort. But I walked into the UPS store on one Wednesday of the following week to mail the book to someone, and I handed my credit card to the UPS man, and my phone rang. And I stepped outside, and I realized it was my editor and Team Lilac, as they call themselves, all the people that worked on the book. And they were telling me, it took me a while to realize, but they said I had made the New York Times bestseller list. And I just was, oh, thank you. Oh, you don't need to do that. Thank you. It was surreal. So I hung up with them in a bit of a daze, and I walked back into the UPS store, and I said, well, if you're wondering who that was, I made the New York Times bestseller list. And I said to one of the men behind the counter, and he said, oh, as he was taping his box, he's like, great. I'm not quite sure he really understood what, the significance of it. But he may not have been too interested, but thank goodness readers were. And people all over the world have reached out to me to tell me how the book has moved them so deeply and helped them overcome difficulties in their own lives, which it makes it all worthwhile. It's being published in 14 countries outside the US, and that's exciting. And all because I took a drive up the Taconic to a little town just north of here to visit an old house. So if you ever get the urge to get in a car and go somewhere and explore something that you're the least bit curious about, trust me, go. You never know where you're going to end up. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm just going to read a very, very quick passage because I want to have time for Q&A because that's my favorite part. For those that haven't, I'm going to put that behind me because it's making noise. For those of you who haven't read the book, a very quick intro. There's 3 characters, as I said. I'm reading a short passage from Caroline's chapters. She's the American. And it's from the first chapter. She has met a man. She's unmarried, but she's met a man who happens to be married. And he is based on a real character. But this is their first dinner together. Nothing, just casual. Monsieur Bernard eased the cork from the champagne with a satisfying sound, more thud than pop. He tipped the golden liquid into my glass, and the bubbles rose to the rim, almost overflowed, then settled, an expert pour. My wife Rena has a little shop near there called Rena's. Have you seen it? I sipped my champagne, the bubbles teasing my lips. Paul slid her picture from his wallet. Rena was younger than I had imagined and wore her dark hair and a China doll haircut. She was smiling, eyes open wide, as if sharing some delicious little secret. Rena was precious, and perhaps my complete opposite. I imagined Rena's to be the type of chic little place that helped women put themselves together in that famous French way. Nothing too matchy, just the right amount of wrong. No, I don't know Rena's, I said. I handed the picture back. She's lovely, though. I finished the champagne in my glass. Paul shrugged. Too young for me, of course, but he looked at the photo a few minutes, as if seeing it for the first time, head tilted to one side before slipping it back in his wallet. We don't see much of each other. I fluttered at the thought, and then settled, weighted by the realization that even if Paul were available, my forceful nature would root out and extinguish any spark of romance. Does Rena ever visit? I asked. I tried to rub a tea stain off my hand, only to find that it was an age spot. Delightful. Not yet. She has no interest in theater, hasn't even come over here to see the streets of Paris yet. But I don't know if I can stay. Hitler has everyone on edge back home. Somewhere in the kitchen, two men argued. Where was our escargot? Had they sent to Perpignan for the snails? At least Paris has the Maginot Line, I said. Ah, the Maginot Line, please, a concrete wall and some observation posts? That's only a gauntlet slap to Hitler. It's 15 miles wide. Nothing will deter Hitler if he wants something, Paul said. There was a full-blown ruckus in the kitchen. No wonder our entree had not arrived. The cook, mercurial artiste no doubt, was having a fit about something. Monsieur Bernard emerged from the kitchen. The port-holed kitchen door swung closed behind him, flapped open and shut a few times, and then stood still. He walked to the center of the dining room. Had he been crying? Excusez-moi, ladies and gentlemen. Someone tapped a glass with a spoon, and the room quieted. I have just heard from a reliable source. Monsieur Bernard took a breath, his chest expanding, like leather fireplace bellows. We have it on good authority that... He paused, overcome for a moment, and then went on. Adolf Hitler has invaded Poland. My God, Paul said. We stared at each other as the room erupted with excited exchanges, a racket of speculation and dread. The reporter from the gala stood, tossed some crumpled dollars on the table, grabbed his fedora and bounded out. In the hubbub that followed his announcement, Monsieur Bernard's final words were almost lost. May God help us all. So that starts the roller coaster ride, and yeah, it gets worse before it gets better. Let me just say that. But anyway, so that is my little reading, and now we can open it up to questions if you have any. Oh, don't be shy. Yes. Yes. I wrote the afterword in about 5 minutes. I didn't even think people would really take it seriously. And boy, have they read it. And yes, Paul was based, I did a lot of research and talked to a lot of Caroline's family members. And I spoke to her French maid, who did not want to talk to me, but I kind of made her. And she ended up talking to me quite a lot. And she told me about a relationship that Caroline had, a long-distance relationship. And he was British, but I made him French. And I made him incredibly handsome. So I hope she's not too mad at me. She deserved a handsome boyfriend. But yes, he was based on that person. Yeah. Yes?
What was the hardest part of the physical act of writing, and what was the easiest?
Oh my goodness, no one's ever asked me that. That's such a good question. The hardest. The hardest, I think, was I had never written a novel before, so I had to teach myself how to do that. And that was really hard, but really, really fun. Every night I would go to bed with a how to write a novel book, and each one, I think I've read like 100. Each one is better than the next. And I feel like I've had the best teachers because there's some wonderful writing teachers that wrote books. The other hard thing was I didn't know if anyone would be interested in the story. So that was kind of hard to wake up every morning and work for 7 hours and then go, this may be for nothing. I may be either self-publishing, which I think is a fine route. I definitely would have done that. But I thought maybe I was a little cuckoo and, just obsessed, and other people wouldn't be interested in the story. So once I realized that they were, it was so validating. Was your other question the easiest thing? Yeah. The easiest thing, wow. I have to say writing it, because I really was possessed. I'm not normally an early riser, but I get up at 7 o'clock ready to go, just no coffee, tea, nothing. Eudora Welty always said a writer should go to their typewriter before they brush their teeth, and I took her seriously. I eventually brushed my teeth, but because that is when the best stuff comes out, for me anyway. So I have to say, I guess it's contradictory in a way, because the hardest thing was learning how to write it, but also the easiest thing was writing it, because it just kind of came out. It was a true labor of love. Yes.
What did you want the takeaway of the character of Herta to be when you were reading it? Did you want the reader to have any sympathy at all for her? Because, she didn't ask for this job. Or did you just want us to dislike her?
Wow, that's great. With none of my characters, I didn't think about what people would think about them. That may sound funny, but I just tried to become them, which was bad for my son, because I'd pick him up in school. And Herta, if you haven't read it, is the Nazi doctor. And he'd say, have you been writing Herta chapters, Mom? And I had. He knew. It was crazy. But I didn't really have an intention, but my agent, when she first offered to represent me, she said, you need to work on the Herta character, because I had made her too cliche. And I didn't realize that. It's easy to make a Nazi character cliche, so I spent a year researching Nazi indoctrination of women and the BDM, which is, the female equivalent of the Hitler Youth. And I'm so glad I did, because it really brought her to life for me. And, I wanted to make her, you really have to love your characters, especially if you're writing in first, and it was hard a little bit loving Herta, but a lot of what's there is parts of me. I tried to make her human. And I think that's why people like that part of the book, because she isn't just kind of vilified and made out to be a horrible person, because I think any of us in that situation, her parents didn't have money, and she had been brainwashed, basically. So yeah, I didn't really try and do anything, but it seems like people like the fact that Herta is not all bad. Yes?
Have you identified any road trips from Atlanta that might be the germ of the next book?
Oh, I know what my next book is. Actually, 2 days ago, we closed a new deal with Random House for 2 books, and they are prequels. So the next book is called Gin Lane. That's a working title. I'm sure they'll change it, just like they changed this title. It is Caroline's mother, Eliza Faraday, who is the star of the next book. And if you've read it, Eliza is this wonderful kind of eccentric person. And it takes place during World War I. And she did a lot of philanthropic work with the White Russians. So the other 2 characters, instead of Herta and Kasha, they are White Russian characters. One's a White Russian, one's a peasant girl. But I just got back from Russia, where I was researching that book. So I'm so excited. And that's going to, I think, be really, very interesting, all based on true story as well. And then the 3rd book takes place in the Civil War, and that tells the story of Caroline's great-grandmother, who was a Wolseley, and she nursed soldiers on the Gettysburg battlefield. And she was an amazing, amazing woman. She tells a great story. She has a memoir, and she talks about the first time that she and her family went to Charleston to the slave market. And it's the most touching, moving, and she's seeing a family broken up, and the mother has to say goodbye to her children. I get sad even talking about it, but so those are the 3 books. So, yeah, we already know, what they're gonna be. Yeah, they just told me, okay, we're gonna have to be patiently waiting for the manuscript. I think that was their way of being like, when are we gonna see it? I was like, uh-oh, better get to the typewriter. Yes?
So is your favorite author or book or voices where you draw your inspiration for writing?
Wow, I haven't been able to read fiction in so long because, at night I've got the writing book, and during the day I had to really get up to speed on so many things like World War II and France and Germany. So, but I did sneak in a little bit of fiction. I love kind of the old classics, Jane Austen. I love Jane. I just keep reading those over and over again because I don't think anybody does it like Jane Austen. I loved Gone with the Wind. My mother was a huge Gone with the Wind fan and read it aloud to us when we were little, so I go back and reread that. I even take inspiration from, this is going to sound crazy, but Charlotte's Web. I know, it's not exactly, Dostoevsky, but I think that book has it all. It's got a tremendous suspense and great characters. So I actually I love E.B. White, and his voice, that New England voice is so terrific. But recently I just read a wonderful mystery called Black Eyed Susans. I don't know if anyone read it. It's terrifying if you like mysteries. But I'd say I'd have to stick with people like Jane Austen. Yeah. Oh goodness, there's two here. Why don't we go with the lady in the red sweater and then black?
What would you say some of the most sort of helpful things that you learned from your editors in this editing process? Because sometimes they're so wonderful.
Wow. No one asked me questions about writing, and those are my favorite questions. About editing. Well, I worked with Betty, my first editor, who was wonderful. She was a Park Avenue lady, so she helped me with Caroline a lot. She's the one that said, she is a spinster and you better get her a boyfriend. And that was really super helpful. I fought that for a while, and then I realized, oh my goodness, it's so true. My second editor, who my agent asked me to work with, it was like a serious, scary editor compared to Betty, who loved everything. Oh gosh, I feel like I could write a book on that because I worked with her so closely. But a lot of things like make sure there's rising tension at all times, conflict. To write in scenes and not just expository. That to me, I think, was the biggest revelation, that you should write in scenes and make it cinematic. And in the second book, that was one of the first things I started doing. But even little things, she would say, in a scene, if there's something happening, pick out one detail and really show that. And I thought that was genius. So, yeah, thank God for editors. Yes.
I was wondering, did you spend any time in Germany at all in doing research on that period, which was dreadful?
Yes, I think dreadful is the perfect word, and you can still feel it. Yes, when we took that train ride to Berlin and then up to Fürstenberg, I spent quite a long time at Ravensbrück doing research there because now it is a memorial. Actually, at the hotel in Germany, in Berlin, my son and I were saying, how do you get up to the Ravensbrück concentration camp? And they said, oh, you mean the memorial? And I said, no, the concentration camp. And they said, you mean the memorial? Like, they won't call it a concentration camp, which was our first clue that was strange. But and there was a gas chamber at the camp, and when the first time we went, there was a little map of the camp, and then it said the supposed site of the alleged gas chamber. And that was definitely not true because the women all knew about it. And the second time we went back, they had a little dot that said gas chamber, former site of the gas chamber. So they're coming along. But yes, I spent quite a lot of time in Germany. And it was really interesting to me when you go from Poland, which when you think about it, at the time, I was there a while ago, and they had just kind of come out from behind the Iron Curtain. You could really tell when you rode on the train because the train stations were just dilapidated. They had weeds growing out of them. And the minute you come into Germany on the train, everything changes because the staff changes. They all speak English, and all of a sudden, the train stations are modern and sleek, and the glass is all perfect. So it just feels like that's when I started feeling like Poland really got a bad deal because they were stuck behind their curtain and no one knew what was happening. Meanwhile, West Germany moved on, and I can't say too much more because there's some spoilers in there. But you know, Germany, I think, did okay for themselves afterwards, sadly. And this, you know, and meanwhile, they had given Poland to Stalin, and it was almost worse in some ways than it was under Hitler. Oh my goodness, now I have so many questions. Yes. Oh, you're telling me 2 minutes. Okay, right back here. You know, I was just at a writers' conference and on a panel, and one of the speakers said he doesn't take any notes because whatever sticks in his head is what goes on the paper. And I thought, oh, I would be in such big trouble if that happened. And I had to kind of say, well, I do it differently. I have white legal pads, and I collect information. Donna Tartt, I heard, does this too, but I just collect stuff I read from the period. Like right now I'm reading books written during the World War I period. And I just collect kind of things from that. And I have pages and pages of that. And I also have a giant timeline in my office that I write with pencil because it changes a lot, but that's my template. And, you know, because history doesn't change, so a lot of that has to stay the same, and I plug my scenes into that. Yes. Yes.
Is Germany one of the countries in which your book has been published, and how is it doing there?
You ask the best questions. It is not, and very interestingly, yeah, my agent is Jewish, and her grandparents were Holocaust survivors, so she has a strong opinion about it, but they were one of the first countries that passed on it. And they said they don't think that Germans are interested in this kind of a story. They've put that behind them. And they said that they got really good reader reports. Like, I guess they have all these people read it and they liked it, but they were like, I don't think they'd be interested. So we'll see. I think now that the other 2 books are coming out, they're announcing it, and they think that might inspire some other countries to, but no, Germany. Poland was, of course, the first, and it just came out there. And I keep getting emails, and they're like, we're so happy Americans are reading this story. So, yeah, I am too. Yes. So I think that's all the time we have, but thank you so much. Thank you.